Move. You don't belong up here. Go back where you came from. A flight attendant on Meridian Air. The woman held up her boarding pass without a word. Seat 3B. It's mine. You look like you can't afford a bus ticket, let alone first class. What did you do, find someone's wallet? Two passengers in the front row exchanged a glance and laughed. The rest looked away. I'm contacting the gate coordinator. They will escort you out. Nobody in this cabin is going to help you. Trust me. The woman didn't move. She didn't flinch. 17 passengers heard every single word. Not one of them spoke. But the man sitting in seat 4A, dark navy hoodie, worn at the cuffs, baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, he saw it all. Every word, every look, every second of it. And when that plane touched down in Houston, that flight attendant would wish she had never opened her mouth. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the beginning. Houston Intercontinental Airport. Terminal D Gate 22, 7:09 in the morning. The terminal smelled like floor wax and coffee. The fluorescent overhead lights buzzed at a frequency that most people had learned to ignore. Most people. Dorothy Harmon walked through that terminal the way she walked through everything in life. Steady, deliberate. Like someone who had already decided the morning was going to be fine before the morning had a chance to argue back. She was 64 years old. A retired fourth-grade schoolteacher from the Riverside Unified School District in Charlotte, North Carolina. 38 years in the same building. Room 11. She had taught more than 1,200 children how to read, how to carry a remainder in long division, and how to believe that the person sitting next to them mattered as much as they did. She had never once taught from a script. Everything she knew about children, she had learned by watching them. Today, Dorothy was flying to Houston to attend her son's annual company dinner. He had invited her months ago. She had hesitated. Not because she didn't want to go, but because she had never been the kind of woman who asked to be celebrated. She had always been the woman in the back of the room, making sure everyone else had what they needed. But her son had told her something over the phone that she hadn't been able to shake. He said, "Mama, you spent 38 years putting other people's kids first. Let me do something for you just once, please." So she said yes. She wore a pale blue cardigan over a pressed white blouse. Gray slacks, low comfortable shoes. Her carry-on was a canvas tote bag, dark green, embroidered with small yellow flowers along the strap. She had carried that bag for 11 years. Her students from her final class had given it to her on the last day of school. They had all signed a card that she kept folded in the inside pocket. She had never replaced the bag. She never would. Seat 3B, first class. She had purchased it herself, $2,612. She had saved it over 8 months, setting aside a little each week from her pension, because her son had told her she deserved a smooth flight for once. She had almost talked herself out of it 4 different times. But she had kept coming back to that conversation on the phone, and she had finally clicked confirm. She boarded, found her row, tucked her tote bag beneath the seat in front of her and sat down. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked out the window at the tarmac. The sky outside was pale gray with the first light of morning. She thought about the card in her bag. She thought about the look on her son's face the last time she had visited him. She thought about how fast time moves once you stop fighting it. That's when Sandra Pruitt arrived. Sandra Pruitt was the lead cabin attendant for Meridian Air, Flight 408, Charlotte to Houston. 14 years on the job. Brown hair pulled back tight, a uniform that was always pressed, a smile that she deployed like a tool and put away the same way. She was 43 years old, originally from a small town outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, and she had built her entire professional identity on one belief. First class was a standard, and it was her job to maintain it. She walked down the aisle toward the front of the plane, doing what she always did, scanning faces, assessing. It was something she had done so many times it had stopped feeling like a choice. She looked at the passengers in their seats the way a museum curator looks at an exhibit arrangement. Everything in its right place, or it isn't. And when she reached row 3, she stopped. She looked at Dorothy, at the cardigan, at the embroidered bag, at the reading glasses on the silver chain around her neck. Sandra made a decision before she checked a single document. "Ma'am." Her voice was flat. Professional in the way that a door being closed is professional. "May I see your boarding pass?" Dorothy looked up. She smiled with the patience of someone who had spent 4 decades watching children learn how the world worked. She reached into the side pocket of her tote bag and handed the pass over. Sandra held it up to the cabin light. She examined it. She turned it slightly as though the angle would reveal something different. I'm going to need to verify this with the gate coordinator. There may be a system error. She said it without looking at Dorothy. There's no error, Dorothy said. I booked it myself. About 3 months ago, Sandra didn't respond. She walked toward the front galley. While she was gone, a man in a navy hoodie and a baseball cap boarded quietly and took his seat in 4A, 1 row behind Dorothy. He put his carry-on in the overhead bin, sat down, pulled his cap low, and looked out the window at the tarmac. Sandra walked right past him on her way back. Didn't glance at him. Didn't offer him a menu. He didn't seem to notice. When Sandra returned, something in her face had shifted. Colder. More certain. Ma'am, I've reviewed the booking with our coordinator. She hadn't. There appears to be a discrepancy with the reservation. I'm going to need to ask you to step aside so we can resolve this before departure. Several passengers looked up. Dorothy's hand stayed folded in her lap. What kind of discrepancy? Sandra straightened slightly, the kind that needs to be resolved at the gate. I have my confirmation email. I have the receipt. I can pull it up on my phone right now. That won't be necessary at this time. Then what is the issue exactly? Sandra looked at her. Not the look of someone trying to solve a problem. The look of someone who had already decided what the problem was and was simply waiting for the other person to accept it. The issue, ma'am, is that first-class reservations are subject to verification when there is a discrepancy between the appearance of the booking and the passenger. I have 14 years of experience in this cabin, and I think I'm capable of identifying when something doesn't add up. The cabin was quiet. The air recycling system hummed. Are you telling me, Dorothy said, that I don't look like someone who bought a first-class ticket? Sandra held her gaze. I'm telling you there is a discrepancy that needs to be resolved. I want to show you my confirmation. I said that won't be necessary. Pay attention to what happened next, because this is the part that tells you everything you need to know about who Sandra Pruitt was. She didn't lower her voice. She chose not to. I've been doing this job for 14 years. I know what a first-class passenger looks like. I know what one sounds like. And I know, in my professional judgment, when something is out of order. She let her eyes travel from Dorothy's cardigan to the embroidered tote bag and back again. Slowly, deliberately, so that everyone watching would understand exactly what she meant. A man in row 5 leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered something. The woman nodded without looking up from her phone. A couple in row 2 kept their eyes on their tablets with the focused intensity of people who were pretending very hard to be somewhere else. Marcus Webb sat in seat 1A. He was a corporate attorney from Charlotte, mid-50s, a man whose entire life had been organized around professional decorum. He watched every second of what Sandra was doing to Dorothy Harmon. His jaw tightened. His right hand moved to the armrest. He pressed his fingers down. He thought about speaking. He thought about what it would cost him to say something to a crew member on a flight he still had to sit on for 3 more hours. He did the math that people do when they're watching something wrong happen and calculating the personal risk of getting involved. He said nothing. He looked down at his phone. James Olusegun was a 24-year-old junior flight attendant, 18 months on the job, standing 4 feet behind Sandra with a stack of menu cards in his hand. He had grown up in a household where silence in the face of injustice was treated as a moral position. His mother had told him that before his first day of work. He had thought about it a lot in the months since. He stood behind Sandra now and felt the wrongness of what was happening, like something pressing against his chest from the inside. But Sandra was lead crew. She decided what happened in this cabin. And he had already watched 2 other junior attendants lose their routes after crossing her. He shifted his weight. He didn't move. Sandra picked up the intercom handset. This is cabin crew. I need gate coordination support in first class, please. Passenger assistance required. Dorothy's hands, folded in her lap, pressed together more tightly. That was the only sign. You don't need to do this. I will show you everything you need, right now. What I need, Sandra said, is for you to stand up. I have a right to this seat. I paid for it. You have a right to cooperate with crew instructions. That is what you have. Raymond Okafor arrived. Airport operations coordinator, big man, quiet voice, experienced enough in airline work to know that crew instructions came first and questions came after. He looked at Dorothy. He looked at Sandra. What's the situation? Sandra straightened her posture. This passenger is occupying a first-class seat that she cannot verify. I have asked her to step aside for gate coordination, and she is refusing to comply. Raymond looked at Dorothy. Ma'am, I need you to come with me so we can sort this out. I have a valid boarding pass. I have a confirmation email. I have a receipt with a transaction number. I can show all of it to you right now. She was already reaching into her bag. Raymond hesitated. 1 second. He looked at Sandra. Sandra looked back at him with the particular confidence of someone who had never once been told they were wrong in their own cabin. That was enough. Ma'am, please stand up. Dorothy stood. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She gathered her tote bag from beneath the seat. She reached for her reading glasses. They were on the armrest, and as she stood, they slipped and fell to the floor of the aisle. The man in row 5, the one who had whispered to his companion, was close enough to see the glasses land near the base of his seat. He looked at them for a moment. He looked at Dorothy. He moved his foot slightly. He did not reach down. Dorothy waited. Then she bent and picked them up herself. Raymond walked her down the aisle toward the back of first class, past every row. 17 passengers, 34 eyes. All of them watching a 64-year-old woman in a pale blue cardigan carry her own bag back down the aisle, because a flight attendant had decided she didn't look like she belonged in the seat she had paid $2,612 to sit in. Nobody said a word. Marcus Webb in 1A watched her walk past. His mouth opened slightly, then it closed. He turned back to his phone. Now here is what Sandra Pruitt did not see. When Raymond guided Dorothy past row 4, something slipped from the front pocket of Dorothy's cardigan and fell silently to the carpet. A small rectangular card. Dark blue cardstock. The corner of the card caught under the seat leg in row 4. The man in 4A, the one in the navy hoodie, who had been sitting with his cap pulled low and his face turned toward the window, he noticed. He reached down, picked up the card, looked at it. He turned it over once. He set it carefully on the tray table in front of him. He folded his hands in his lap. He looked straight ahead at the seat back in front of him, and then he did something that no one in that cabin expected. He took out his phone, dialed a number, and when the call connected, he spoke quietly, without drama, without urgency, without any particular emotion in his voice at all. "It's me," he said. "I need you to get Marcus Hale on the line. Tell him to stay in the terminal. We're going to be a few minutes late." He set the phone down. He pressed the crew call button above his seat. Sandra appeared in the aisle. She looked at the man in the hoodie and baseball cap. She had walked past him twice without registering him. She looked at him now, the way someone looks at a person they're trying to place. Something felt slightly off. She couldn't name it. "Can I help you?" "Can you call back whoever you sent to escort the woman from seat 3B, he said. "And can you have your senior ground operations contact come to this cabin? Now please." Sandra's smile clicked on. "Sir, that situation is being handled by our coordination team. Is there something I can help you with personally?" "The woman who was just removed from seat 3B, he said, is Dorothy Harmon. Her full name is Dorothy May Harmon. She was a schoolteacher in Charlotte for 38 years. He paused. "She's also my mother." Sandra's smile did not move. "Sir, I understand that's upsetting, but the situation involves a reservation discrepancy, and our staff are handling it correctly." "There is no discrepancy," he said, "and I'd like to talk to your ground ops supervisor before this plane pushes back. Not after now. I can assure you that our crew has followed proper procedure." He reached into the chest pocket of his hoodie and placed a business card on the tray table. "My name is Nathan Harmon," he said. "I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Harmon Meridian Holdings. Meridian Air is one of 6 companies under that holding group." He tapped the card once. "Your ground ops supervisor, please." The air in the cabin changed. Not from sound, but from the absence of it. The recycling system kept humming. Outside the window, a luggage cart moved across the tarmac. But in the cabin, something went completely still. The kind of still that only happens when everyone in a room understands simultaneously that they have just witnessed something that cannot be undone. Sandra looked at the card. She picked it up, she read it. She set it down. She read it again. "Sir, I wasn't aware that," she began. "I'd like my mother back in her seat," Nathan said. "And I'd like your supervisor." In that order. Sandra's face did something complicated. Years of professional composure doing battle with the reality of what she had done in front of 17 witnesses. "Sir, I want to assure you that our crew was following proper verification protocol. If I had known if you had known that she was my mother," Nathan said. "That's what you were about to say." She stopped. "The issue," he said, "isn't whether you knew. The issue is what you did before you knew." He said it quietly, without anger, without performance. Like a man who had learned a long time ago that the quieter he spoke, the more clearly people heard him. Marcus Webb in 1A had put his phone face down on the tray table. He was watching Nathan Harmon the way you watch someone defuse something. James Olusegun, the junior flight attendant still standing 4 feet behind Sandra, took a very slow, very careful breath. Raymond Okafor brought Dorothy Harmon back to seat 3B 4 minutes later. She sat down, placed her tote bag beneath the seat, folded her hands in her lap, and looked out the window at the gray morning sky. She did not look at Sandra. She did not look at the passengers around her. She looked at the sky, and whatever she was thinking, she kept it entirely to herself. The ground operations supervisor, a woman named Carol Whitfield, arrived in the cabin. Nathan spoke to her privately, in measured sentences, for approximately 3 minutes. Carol's face shifted through several expressions in that time. She took notes on her phone. She thanked Nathan. She asked him twice if he wanted anything. He said no both times. Sandra Pruitt stood in the front galley. She was very still. She had the look of someone running through a conversation in their mind, trying to find the moment where they could have said something different. But here is the thing about a moment like that one. You can run it back 1,000 times. The moment that matters isn't the business card on the tray table. It isn't the phone call, or the supervisor, or the 17 witnesses. The moment that matters is earlier. It's the second when Sandra looked at a 64-year-old woman in a pale blue cardigan and made a decision in her gut before she checked a single fact. That moment does not disappear just because everything else changes around it. Flight 408 departed Charlotte at 7:51 in the morning. It was quiet in first class for most of the flight. Dorothy read from a paperback novel she kept in her tote bag. Nathan sat in 4A with his cap pulled low and his laptop open, reading documents that no one else in the cabin could see. At one point, the flight attendant James Olusegun brought Dorothy a cup of tea without being asked. He set it on her tray table. He didn't say anything. Dorothy looked up, found his face, and nodded once. James nodded back and walked away. That was the whole exchange. No words. It was enough. When the plane landed in Houston at 10:23 in the morning, a Meridian Air senior vice president named Gerald Tran was waiting at the gate. He was 47 years old, had been with the airline for 11 years, and had received a phone call from his own supervisor's supervisor approximately 40 minutes into the flight. He had spent the remaining hour and 20 minutes of that flight arranging meetings. The internal review that followed took 9 days. What the investigators found was not a surprise to anyone who had been paying attention, although it was a surprise to the people who should have been paying attention earlier. Sandra Pruitt had filed 17 incident reports in the previous 4 years involving passengers she had identified as presenting a discrepancy between their booking class and their, in her language, expected presentation. Of those 17 reports, 14 involved passengers who were black. 12 of those 14 had resulted in the passenger being relocated to a lower cabin class or removed from the aircraft entirely. 3 of those 12 had filed formal complaints. All 3 complaints had been received, logged, assigned a case number, and closed without action. 3 people, 3 different flights, 3 separate warnings. The system had seen every one of them, and the system had done nothing. Until Dorothy Harmon sat in seat 3B, and her son happened to be in 4A, the disciplinary action was specific and final. Sandra Pruitt was terminated from her position as lead cabin attendant effective immediately. 14 years. Gone. But Meridian's board, under pressure from Nathan Harmon's legal team and its own internal equity committee, agreed to a structured path. Sandra could apply for reinstatement after completing a 6-month mandatory equity and anti-bias certification program. serving in a ground operations role during that period and submitting to quarterly reviews by an independent compliance officer. Not a slap on the wrist. A door that was barely open, and only for someone willing to walk through it honestly. James Olusegun, the junior attendant, who had stood behind Sandra and said nothing, submitted a written statement to the internal review team. He described everything he had witnessed. He described what he had felt and what he had chosen not to do. His statement ran 4 pages. The last paragraph read, "I knew it was wrong. I did the calculation of what it would cost me personally, and I chose silence. I want that on the record, because I think it matters that someone on this crew is honest about what silence is." Nobody had asked him to submit that statement. Nobody would have known if he hadn't. 3 days after he submitted it, he transferred to Meridian's crew training division. Voluntarily, he took a pay adjustment. He didn't ask for anything in return. Marcus Webb, the attorney in Seat 1A who had done his calculations and said nothing, spent 2 weeks thinking about the flight. He didn't talk about it. He went to work, came home, sat in his study at night, and thought about the moment Dorothy Harmon's reading glasses had fallen to the aisle floor and he had done nothing. He thought about what kind of calculation that was and what it said about the man who made it. Eventually, he donated a substantial amount of money to an organization that provides legal representation to air travelers who have been mistreated by airline staff. He has never spoken publicly about why. Sandra Pruitt completed the full 6-month program. Ground operations, quarterly reviews, bias certification modules, and something the program called perspective simulation. A series of role-playing exercises where she had to stand in a cabin and watch someone else be treated the way she had treated Dorothy Harmon. She was required to observe. She was not allowed to intervene. She had to watch it happen and then write about it. That was the hardest part, not the paperwork, not the early mornings working ground operations in the cold, the watching. 3 months after finishing the program, she wrote a letter. Not a corporate letter. Not the kind that gets reviewed by a lawyer before it's sent. A personal one. Handwritten on 3 pages of plain white paper. She wrote about growing up in Knoxville, in a house where certain assumptions about people were treated as common sense, as obvious, as something that didn't need explaining because everyone around her already agreed. She wrote about 14 years of building a mental map of who belonged in first class, a map drawn entirely from appearances, and how she had never once questioned it because no one had ever made her. She wrote, "I didn't think I was the kind of person who does what I did on that flight. That is the most honest thing I can tell you. And I understand now that not thinking you're that kind of person is exactly how you become that kind of person." Dorothy read the letter in her living room in Charlotte, in the chair by the window that faced the back garden. She read it once. She set it on the side table next to her reading glasses. She sat quietly for a while. 3 weeks later, she sent a reply. It was short, 5 sentences. The last one read, "I spent 38 years teaching children that what they don't know yet is not a reason to stop. If you learn something, that is enough." 6 months after Flight 408, Meridian Air launched a company-wide training initiative. Every cabin attendant, every gate agent, every ground operations coordinator, every customer-facing employee in the organization. Mandatory. Recurring. They called it the Room 11 Protocol after Dorothy Harmon's classroom. On the wall of every Meridian crew lounge in the country, in a simple wooden frame, is a piece of pale yellow paper with words written in blue marker, reproduced in Dorothy's handwriting. Every person in this room matters. No exceptions. She had originally written those words for her 4th graders on the first day of school in September 1987. She had written the same words on the first day of every school year for the next 37 years. The Room 11 Protocol completed its first full cycle 18 months after the flight. Over 1,400 Meridian employees went through it. Reports of passengers being incorrectly questioned about their cabin booking dropped by 46% in the first year alone. 3 regional carriers contacted Meridian, requesting access to the curriculum. Nathan Harmon was asked about the incident during a shareholders' presentation. He paused before answering. The pause was long enough that the room noticed it. "It wasn't an incident," he said. "It was a failure. Our failure. And we are in the process of fixing what we should have fixed before it ever happened." He didn't mention his mother by name. He didn't need to. Dorothy watched the clip that evening from her chair by the window. The garden outside was dark. Her reading glasses were on. The embroidered tote bag hung on the hook by the front door, where she always kept it. She called Nathan when the clip ended. She didn't say anything about the shareholders. She didn't say anything about the protocol or the clip or the framed paper in the crew lounges. She said, "I didn't raise you to make yourself the hero of someone else's story." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I know, Mama. Good. Are you okay?" She looked at the tote bag by the door, the yellow flowers on the strap. The faint wear along the bottom edge, where 11 years of carrying had softened the canvas. 1,200 students. 38 years. Room 11. She thought about the card they had put in the inside pocket. The way the whole class had lined up to hug her on the last day. "I'm fine," she said. "Get some rest." She hung up. She took her reading glasses off. She set them on the side table. She sat in the quiet of her living room for a long time, in the house where she had spent most of her life. And she did not say anything to anyone, because some things don't need words to be true. Seat 3B, that's where it started. One seat, one ticket, one woman who was told by the look in someone's eyes that she did not belong. A flight attendant looked at a pale blue cardigan and a worn canvas bag and decided in 3 seconds what kind of person was sitting in front of her. She was wrong. But she was also only wrong in the part she thought she was right about. The part underneath, the part where she looked at a human being and saw something to assess rather than someone to serve, that part is not fixed by a business card on a tray table. That part requires something harder. It requires the willingness to look at the map you've been carrying in your head your whole life, and to ask honestly who drew it, and why. Dorothy Harmon didn't need anyone to save her. She had spent 38 years walking into rooms full of the people who underestimated her and teaching them what mattered anyway. She didn't need a rescue. She needed the people around her to do their jobs, to see her, to treat her like she was already exactly where she was supposed to be. Belonging isn't something that gets decided by a uniform, or a cabin class, or the look of a bag, or the softness of a cardigan. It was never Sandra's to assign. It was never the cabin's to vote on. It was never up for negotiation. Dorothy May Harmon belonged in seat 3B because she had paid for it, yes. But long before that, long before the ticket, long before the flight, long before any of it, she belonged because she was a person. That was always enough. It always is. If this story stayed with you, not because of the ending, but because you recognize someone in it, maybe yourself, maybe someone you've seen, maybe someone you've been, hit like so that this reaches the people who need to hear it. Share it with someone who might be carrying that map in their head and doesn't know it yet. And leave a comment with the question that's been sitting with me since I first heard this story. When you've been in that cabin and something wrong was happening, which seat were you in? I read every single answer.